Hi, folks. It's Jonesy. It is time for that bi-weekly getting to a Dynatrace session. Now, my voice or my video and audio may be cutting out on me, and that's because, hold on, I'll get that up there. Hopefully you can see this. Yep, my internet is down, so I'm broadcasting to you from my phone. Because my internet's down, I'm going to actually forego the usual segments that we do every week, which is usually the, what's new and the did you know segments. And we're going to just drop right into the demo. So today, this week, we have Troy, who's going to be leading our demo today. So take it away, Troy.
Thank you, Jonesy. This is like a cold start on Saturday Night Live, right? So here we go.
Exactly.
My name's Troy. I am an SE here in St. Louis, Missouri. For the last 15 years, I have been in the architect space, with the last 7 being infrastructure architecture for an education firm here, Washington University here in St. Louis. And I will say that as I've gotten to know this platform since I've joined Dynatrace, I've been very impressed with the complexity increase in the software side. So I'm really happy that this platform, everything I learned about it is just fantastic. I'm really happy to do this presentation because from the infrastructure side going on to the software side, it's been an amazing journey. And now I'm really happy to kind of show what's going on. So thanks for that cold start. I think I've got my screen shared. So can we jump over to that? Okay, so what we see here is a dashboard. A lot of our competitors have dashboards. They like to make them look pretty. I don't necessarily like dashboards. We've got them. All of our metrics that we capture in the Dinotrace platform can be shown on a dashboard. But what's the problem with dashboards is it's like a state and time. Okay, it doesn't give you any problem resolution. It doesn't tell you what root cause is if something's showing red. So you see here, this is an site reliability engineering SLOs dashboard put together by Andy, and it's got some red on it. So that's indicating that deployments and such are not meeting their SLOs, error budgets are getting busted. It's not telling you any of the details on that. All the metrics are being backed by this, being pushed up to the dashboard, but really what Dynatrace can do is take it to the next level, provide causality, and find that root cause analysis. I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but first I'm going to show you how easy it is to start populating these dashboards and start getting the metrics into the system. So we'll jump over to that. Anything to add to that, Jonesy, if you can, on your phone, with regards to dashboards?
You're doing great.
Okay.
Yep. Nope. Great job, man.
Okay. Well, awesome. So let's jump over to how we get this this metrics and this data populated in the environment. We jump over to the Dynatrace hub, and all of our magic happens. Majority of our magic happens. We've got the ability to consume APIs and such. The majority of our magic happens inside the one agent. And this is a single install as opposed to other competitors that might have a different agent for a different technology. We drop a single agent on a host and it starts pulling a ton of different information. And it's really as simple as going into download, pick your operating system. Let's just go into Windows, entering a PAS token. Once you create that, you're able to download the installer. It'll give you a script to run once it's installed. and boom, you're live. Now, there might be some processes that you have to restart, but host metrics and interconnection between and dependencies between other one-agent installs that you have out there are going to start auto-populating. So these metrics, what's really cool about it is our Davis AI. It's an engine that was built from the start at the core of our platform. It's not something that we bolted on later. The Davis AI will take all of those dependencies and processes that we are mapping with the one-agent install and throw it into what we call a smartscape. Now, this looks pretty intense. This is all the services and such that are in our environment now on this demo environment. But we're going to filter this to a management zone for AWS so that we get a little bit more clarity. This is all the information that's in AWS for this demo environment. And what's great about the management zones is it allows you to filter out the content, the services, processes, hosts to a team, to a control group, to an area of responsibility, so that other teams don't have the noise of the cross population between other teams. So what you see here is a real-time topology of the environment inside AWS. I filtered that to the management zone, and it's got applications, which are the front-end user experience components, which are running on services, and those services are running inside processes. Those processes are on hosts, and those hosts are inside data centers. And we have 9 data centers inside the AWS, and those are availability zones inside AWS. But what's great is you can use this to find linkages between services, between processes, flow of communications. So if we take, I'm going to give you a quick little preview. We're going to be talking about the check destination service. So if I come in here, I can filter by the check destination service, come in here, click on this, zoom in, and I can see that there is an arrow communication here. It might be hard to see, but this is coming from the journey service. So we'll click on the journey service a little bit better. This journey service has flows between other services. The arrows indicate the direction of the services. And you can find out where that journey service is running inside the environment. So you can see that journey service, which is running on 4 different processes on 2 different hosts. And the Davis AI was able to determine that the journey service in those different processes on those hosts are functioning the same, and lump those together as a single service. So it not only displays this linkages, but it cleans up the noise in your environment. One also thing, a lot of people are moving to serverless. This is not just one agent information plugged into onto a host that populates a smartscape. We can also leverage, since we're in AWS, we can also leverage the AWS API and filter for lambdas. And you can see there are actually some serverless functions that are happening inside this environment. And I'm going to be running inside any process hosts or data centers, but they're serverless, right? So these services are showing what flow of communication are happening inside your environment. So it's not just physical assets. You've got the serverless functions too. And we can connect into anything inside your AWS environment and pull down metrics. Jonesy, anything you want to add to the smartscape, or I'll move on to the problem?
Yeah, no. Can you guys hear me okay? Is it still chopping in and out? Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, folks. We're having some technical difficulties on my side. I'm coming to you live through my phone. So the Smartscape, ultimately, it gives us a way to be able to not only visualize the topology, but it's a view into how our AI sees the world. Our AI sees things in a very hierarchical fashion. As Troy mentioned, applications run on top of services, on top of processes. But it also allows us to see things horizontally, so I can understand what service is talking to what other service, what process is talking to what other process, what host is talking to what other host. This topology is generated in near real time. So it's almost a perfect complement to using things like, for example, ServiceNow. you can use Dynatrace to help populate your ServiceNow CMDB. So it always has a fresh list of CIs. Great job, Troy, demonstrating that. Let's just keep going.
Well, I want to add, so that's generally the core part on of the demo for the Smartscape. But I also want to add from my infrastructure background, one thing that would have been awesome in my previous employ, and that's shadow IT. One thing that this, when a one agent is installed on your systems, one step removed, anything that hits your box, you're going to get that direction flow to that box. And in the university space, there were lots of researchers that went out and bought a Supermicro box, put it under their desk, plugged it into the network, and started consuming resources and services that the university provided, but we wouldn't necessarily know inside the IT organization. This Smartscape would pick up the fact that somebody is hitting that from a host that is an unmonitored entity, and it would let you know that there is an unmonitored entity out there that you could potentially drop a one agent on, or just it's there. That level of detail is something that could be beneficial across any organization that might have shadow IT.
That's actually a super interesting point, Troy. The whole idea of Dynatrace, that agent does a bunch of automated discovery on the host that it's installed onto. But because of the way the agent is designed, it's also analyzing the traffic that's being reached out from those machines where the agent exists. And to your point, often Dynatrace can discover potential monitoring candidates. These are machines that are clearly in communication with each other, and Dynatrace is aware that, hey, you know what? This box is talking to this other box. We should put an agent on there so that we can understand what that communication between the two is. That's a very good point.
Right. Well, I'll jump over and answer this question with a wait and see. Suele, would it be correct to say these are nodes along a journey map of the customer and device? Yes, but you're going to get even more information coming down the pipeline when I walk through a service flow. So just wait. You'll see how a user's journey and their set of actions are able to actually see along the journey, along their click path, how things are actually actionable in your environment, what's going on. So just give me a wait and see on that one. Let's see. Is there any
Yeah,
other questions
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna interject, Troy, that that's a really good question. And what Troy will show us with the service flow is just that. Is the different nodes that you can expect, or end-to-end service transactions that you can expect to see inside of Dynatrace. That topology model is more of a model of relationship between entities. And an entity could be anything that Dynatrace describes within this model. So you see things at a service layer, you see things from a process to process point of view, you see how hosts talk to each other. So those we would describe as entities in our topology model, whereas in our service flow map, you're typically looking at upstream and downstream services. And yeah, Troy's going to actually demonstrate that. Now, there's another question here. In the GCP realm, should you turn off the default monitoring after installing the one agent? You don't need to the best of my knowledge. If you're using GCP and GCP has its own internal monitoring capabilities, you don't need to turn it off if you turn on Dynatrace. You might want to do that just for the sake of reducing costs that are associated, because most of the hyperscalers, and when I say hyperscalers, that's the cloud vendors, be it Azure, AWS, GCP, typically what's going to happen is, those hyperscalers, if you turn on their monitoring services, you're likely going to incur a charge for that. So unless there's a really specific reason to keep it on, you don't necessarily have to if you've already deployed agents onto those machines. And yeah, I think keep going at this point, Troy. We got lots of great questions coming in, folks.
I see that. Lots of great ones. Okay, so we've got the Smartscape. We've seen how easy it is to install, and it was mirrored that it's a 2-minute install. Yeah, it's fast. You can install this across thousands of boxes. at a time. You're going to need some sort of automation for that in your environment. Plus, you're going to have to think about how you do that install. It's not something that you could just automate, shotgun out to your environment. There's going to have to be a lot of thought processes. So yes, it's a 2-minute install on a single host. But if you're going to throw this out to tens of thousands of boxes in your environment, you're definitely going to want to make sure your architecture and your deployment model can handle that. So now we've seen the Smartscape, we've seen the install, but really all of this feeds into what is the bread and butter, is the problem resolution and the root cause analysis inside Dynatrace. So I'm going to jump over to problems, and I've got it filtered to, it's still on AWS, and its time frame is set for today. So these are problems that have happened today. And what's great about that time frame selector is it's not when you go to each individual window, it needs to be refreshed. You need to filter. Once you set a time frame and then you start to interact with the application, it will keep that time frame. So you're not constantly trying to remember where you filtered it to when you look for a problem or you look for some solution. It's still there. So that's great that it doesn't require you to keep filtering back and forth. Now, I'm going to choose this one, this user action duration degradation. And what I want to, before I click into this and show the magic of that problem card, one thing to consider is that this problem, it's not a break. It's a reduction in service levels for a period of time. And the Dynatrace AI was able to pick up on that. And unless you were actually looking at the dashboard during that window of time, you might have missed it. If it was just a blip due to a backup window, or you've got thresholds set incorrectly, that wouldn't capture that type of degradation. The AI's got you covered. And I'm going to expand on that, but I want you to know that this is a degradation. It's not an availability. The system wasn't down, not a hard stop. It was able to provide a problem card for this. So I'm going to jump into here. Now, what you see here is auto-generated problem card from the Davis AI. It went through and looked at over 13,000 monitored entities and found that there was an issue going on, and that was busting auto-detected baselines for a service. And it threw up this problem card, found the start time of just after 1 o'clock in the morning. That went for about 29 minutes. And I'm going to show you, it affected 819 users. I'm going to repeat that. It's a problem card, found the problem, knows when it started, and who was impacted by it. It's not just all 17,000 users are impacted by this, we think. Davis knows who these users are. That's real business impact. I don't know of anything that can do that right now and provide that level of detail, that if your system is having a slowdown, and I've had experiences where I've been on a retail site, I've had issues with it. I've gotten to the point where I loaded something in the cart and I couldn't finish the transaction and I left. And then a day or two later, I get a message saying, sorry, hey, you've abandoned a cart. Come back and buy this product, and here's maybe a discount depending on my tier in that space. Now, instead of giving it to everybody, that discount, you can try to bring people back to your brand that might have been negatively impacted. You can target that to the 819 people that were impacted by this problem. And depending on what the problem was, it might be an extreme where you get somebody to reach out for it, depending on what this application is. So I've gotten to the point where I've got a business impact. I'm going to put a pin in that right now. I spoke about that a little bit now, but we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of this problem card. You can see what was impacted, the application, services, and infrastructure. But what's great is Davis AI is able to provide you with details on the application performance, and it's showing that the response time of 1.14 seconds exceeded an auto-detected baseline of 300 milliseconds. Now, Davis calculates that auto baseline over the course of several days. So after one agent is installed and it's detected your services and users have started coming into your application, it will continually adjust what is considered its baseline to get to a normal state. You can adjust those baselines to be thresholds that you want as well. You don't have to leverage the auto detected, but instead of having to require you to configure baselines before you start getting meaningful data such as this, that there was a problem busting that baseline, it does it for you automatically. And it's smart enough to know whether or not a specific browser was impacted, whether a region like Asia or the US was impacted, or whether or not you were using a Windows or an iOS or an Android operating system. That's huge, because if you have an application that is across multiple tiers, across multiple platforms, that all, you want to know what version, what type of user, what they were doing, as opposed to, hey, there's a problem, maybe go and investigate. Jonesy, anything to add so far?
Just getting off mute. No, you're doing great, Troy.
Okay,
But
thanks.
you know what though, just to re-emphasize, because I think it's super important, the things that you're highlighting here, that business impact analysis, being able to understand that when there's a problem, who are the users that were potentially impacted by the problem, that is a massive advantage. So imagine that you're using Dynatrace to actually monitor an application that is an internal facing application for your organization. How often do you have problems and not be able to understand who those users are? Now with Dynatrace, you can not only know that there's a problem, you know who's potentially been impacted by this problem. That allows you to be much more proactive, right? So now you can reach out to those users and you could say to them, hey, you know what? We see that you've had this potential problem. Here's some things that you can do in the interim while we try to work on fixing that problem. We've actually had customers of ours use that specific capability to create outbound marketing campaigns. So in the scenario where it's more of a B2C or a business to consumer type scenario, when their applications go down, by being able to capture who are the prospects, who are the customers, what you can then do with that information is you could send outbound marketing messages to those customers, give them a special offer, say, hey, we realized that you had a problem on your application when you last visited. Here's a 20% off coupon. And the feedback that we've had from our customers that have used that type of scenario is that they tended to get a higher conversion rate off of that tailored marketing message than if they hadn't actually sent it out or hadn't had a problem, which was kind of an interesting sort of scenario. Troy, fabulous stuff. Keep going, man.
Well, I want to riff on that a little bit more, in that business impact for internal customers. And I know I've heard it before, where the users might not be technical. They might not be able to tell you exactly what was going wrong when they were doing it. And one point that we're going to get to in a little bit is session replay, being able to look at the user session, what their click path was. So instead of what Jonesy was saying, you've got somebody investigating these, instead of having to go to the user themselves and say, what were you doing, and try to recreate it, you can actually see what steps they were doing. And that level of impact for the internal customers, and keep them working for your customer. I mean, it's huge. It's phenomenal. So we'll get back to we'll get back to the problem card now. So I'm going to jump over from, we know that things are impacted. That's on the left side. Let's take a look at what was happening with this problem step by step, and it's a visual representation of that. So the visual resolution path. Now, what you see here is a snapshot of the smartscape. It's the interdependencies and the linkages between the services and processes of the environment. And what you're going to see as we click through this is, how did the problem evolve? Wow, so just this first click, everything lit up. Suddenly I've got 38 ongoing events. And those just keep going. Things are starting to go red in the environment. And this problem is actually already solved. So as we click through this, you can start to see things going back to green. But what's amazing about this is the Davis AI has taken all of those alerts in the environment, and it was smart enough to stitch them all together into a single problem card. Now, I have been involved in war rooms where the environment got lit up with alerts, and you throw everybody in a room and everybody starts pointing fingers. Okay, well, This right here is what that pointing fingers is, because all of those alerts got fired off. Throw everybody in a room, try and figure it out. So now we have all this alert storm rolled up into a single problem card, and it's been solved. But the whole root cause, instead of a war room even being needed, Davis AI was able to take all these alerts and problems and figure out what caused it from the beginning, and that's this check destination service. So no longer is there finger pointing. I know if you're an ops guy, I know that there is this check destination service that I need to research. And what Davis also was able to do through our integration that we have configured in this environment with ServiceNow was able to determine that the check destination service is modified through a deployment. Now, if you're this ops guy who's taking a look at this problem, you don't have to wake up the network guy. You don't have to wake up the database guy. You have to wake up Chuck Ryan, the owner of this deployment, and say, the check destination service just went haywire. I need you to come in and look at this. I don't know about you, but sleep is important to me. Ever since I had kids, I don't get enough. The fact that I don't have to be woken up as the infrastructure guy or the database guy anymore, and only Chuck has to lose sleep because he pushed a piece of code that caused a problem, that's huge.
So, hey, Troy, you're nailing it here. And the interesting conversation I had with someone who had been using another set of tools to monitor their applications. What he described to me was that at 2:00 in the morning, when he gets woken up because of an alert, he now has 250 different dashboards that he has access to. So he's got all these data visualizations, but he doesn't know which one to look at. And that was this problem, that when he gets that 2:00 in the morning call, he doesn't know where to go in all of the sets of data that he has to figure out where the problem actually lies. This is like laser focused. Not only, does it basically prevent everyone from getting woken up, but the guys who do get woken up, they know exactly where they should be looking, because Dynatrace has identified down, in this case, to the service level, what the root cause of that issue is. And it also allows you to go even further to analyze what's causing that problem.
Yeah, look, we're going to hit that in a second, but I'm going to go back to this deployment. So the ops team, if they are empowered to initiate remediation, or if you've got auto remediation based off of your deployments set up with Ansible Tower, that can be triggered automatically from Dynatrace as well. So in this deployment, you can see that there's a webhook in here for remediation. If the ops guy wants to get in here and click that and suddenly roll back the deployment, they can. If it's something to QA or stage, so it's not a critical remediation, you could actually leave Chuck asleep. It just depends on what the problem is, the ops team deciding that. Well, let's assume for a second that it is a problem in production. It's been rolled out, Chuck's been woken up. He may take a few minutes instead of automatically doing this remediation. He may just say, okay, let's take a look to see if this is something that I can fix quickly. So you can come in here and analyze what's going on with this problem. Come on. Took a double click. Okay, so when we look at this, we can see that service execution is going haywire. There isn't any database usage. It's not interacting with any services or queues that is causing this problem. So if we open up the service execution and we look at the method hotspots, we can dive in and see what's causing this problem. Now, it's identified 3 hotspots. 2 of them are built in, so we're not going to worry about those. Plus, they're contributing very little to the poor performance. But if we look at this calculate section index, and it's got it selected down here, we can see that at the code level, Dynatrace knows that there is a loop that has happened, and it is continually adding time to this problem. Now, Chuck, if he knows, I probably forgot to close the loop correctly, there's some sort of increment I didn't do right on the code. I can fix this in 2 seconds. If he's authorized to do this, empowered to do this, run it through the chain on getting it pushed out front of the deployment, he could fix this code. And instead of destroying everything that was deployed for that version release, which could be features, expansion, it could be code fixes, bug fixes that are not impacted by this check destination that he would have to roll back and not have out in the environment and schedule another deployment later, he may be able to fix this method quickly and do a roll forward instead and get to a good state with all those features and bug fixes in place, as opposed to rolling back and having to hear it from his boss. So anything else to add to that, Jonesy? This is huge. Being able to fix code, roll forward without having to roll back, all because they spent another couple of minutes diving into the code level analysis that Davis AI provides you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Troy, we've used two different ways of illustrating what Dynatrace really brings to the table here. One is how Dynatrace can help facilitate the whole automation process, right? So in that particular problem card, when you drilled into that root cause and you looked at the details for the deployment change, you actually see there was an Ansible script there that had run, right? And that Ansible script had actually rolled back that change. So the whole idea is that Dynatrace can 100% allow you to, you know, automate things like your CI/CD pipeline, and then you're using it in combination with your ITSM tools, your CMDBs. You're having conversations about things without having to go search around for stuff. You're not trying to find out, are we in fact working with the correct CI? Are we, in this particular case, talking about apples and oranges? We're having conversations always about the right topic. And then the ability for an operator to be able to drill back in, and see down at the method level what methods were in fact actually responsible for causing that issue. That's huge, because they don't have to go in and try to recreate the issue. They don't have to have very expensive human capital, their best and brightest most talented people sifting through log files trying to find where that problem is. In this case, a couple of points and click, and Dynatrace gives you the hotspot for it.
Very nice. Excellent. Okay, so let's roll back to the problem card and dive into the business impact. I did put a pin in that earlier, so let's jump into it. So we see that there are a bunch of users that were in this, identified on this problem card. We're going to dive into user sessions. And what I'm going to filter this by is user experience. Now I'm going to try and see, I'm going to check to see whether or not there's anyone that's frustrated. Okay, I see that there are some frustrated people. Really, there are only a single one. Those aren't very meaningful for me. So let's change that to tolerated. Remember, this was a service degradation, so things were still getting done, but not sharply, not quickly. And what we see here now is that there are some auto-calculated user experiences that were tolerated. They're not satisfied by it, but they're tolerated, so they still got they still completed their processing, whatever they're doing inside the Easy Travel application. So I've selected Maria here, and you can see that she's got 4 sessions, and that she did have conversions. And conversions are, you've tagged parts of your application as you're going through it, whether it's getting through to a cart, whether it's completing a purchase. These steps are programmed by you. I can tag really whatever we want, whether it's a login, and we've identified that. But her 4 sessions, they don't look so good. They're tolerable. And if we dive into this session, we can see that first load took 5.52 seconds. Now that's a long time to sit on a page waiting for it to pop up. And this one doesn't have session replay, which I'm going to show on another user. But this one, we can dive into the waterfall analysis on this user's session and see what was happening for that service call, for that load of a page that a user tried to do. So now I've clicked into,
Troy, we have a question. Before we get any deeper, let's talk about the question real quickly. So, and it's a great question. Thank you very much. It's basically, you know, what information is taken into consideration before we decide somebody's got a frustrated, a tolerable, or a satisfied experience. So Dynatrace uses very much a standard way of being able to define things. And thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, it is called Aptx, right? So Aptx is a multi-vendor standard for defining customer or end user experience. It works on a basis of a certain amount of thresholding. So you have predefined thresholding. So anything in between, say, 0 and you can modify what these numbers are. But I could say anything between 0 and 1 or 2 seconds, that should be a satisfactory experience. Anything between, say, 2 and 3 or 4 seconds, that's a tolerable experience. And then anything above that, that's a frustrated experience. So the whole idea is that automatically, you don't have to really do anything. Dynatrace is going to give you a pretty good idea as to what sort of experience your end users are getting.
Excellent. I think Jonesy froze, so I'll just go ahead and run. Oh no, you're still there, man.
No,
You were
I'm still here. I'm still here.
very stationary there.
I stopped talking.
Excellent. Okay, so if we're back to my screen, excellent. We're looking at a synthetic user, so it's not an actual user that went and clicked all the individual items. It was a click path that was recorded for performance capabilities of this application, and you can do that inside the Dynatrace platform. You basically go and hit the synthetic recorder, do the steps that you want to make sure happen, and then have it run on a set schedule. And that's what that user session is. So it wasn't an actual real user that had a tolerated session. It was a synthetic, but based off what Jonesy said on the Aptx, it still is able to generate a score, and we can see how performance is. And here's what the click path would be in the application. But let's get down to this waterfall. And you can see, oh my, these resources for this initial load, remember we clicked the initial load of the web page, took forever to load. And these are just static images. But we're gonna flip that a little bit, and I know we can dive into there, but we're gonna look at what a trace of a component of this load actually is showing. And there are benefits that happen outside of just solving this person's tolerable. You could have satisfied user experiences that load things, but you want to increase performance in a component of your application. We're going to look at that on this waterfall analysis, this special offers. You can see that it starts loading and it takes about 3.84 seconds to load. So that's a pretty long time to load a special offer. So if we click in here on a special offer, we can see what the trace is happening inside special offer. And now, when loading the special offer inside that initial load action, we can see all the calls and the timings of those calls and the database calls that happen for that initial load, and what the special offers was spending its time doing. This is powerful to find hotspots that are inside your application, inside a specific load, a component of it, an XHR action. Now you can start to streamline your code and improve performance. Anything you want to add with regards to a trace of a component, Jonesy, before I go back? Because I want to get to the service flow.
Yeah, hold on. This is almost like a drop mic moment. Like, let's just think about all of the different things that we just showed. You're literally looking at how did a page load in an end user's browser. So
Yes.
now we know from the client side, from the user's browser, we know exactly how much time it's taking those different resources to load. And then what Troy showed was we can go into an individual resource and then we can click on that show trace. And now we can see the complete end-to-end response. So we can see every service that's being touched, every database. If the response makes its way back to a third-party service or even the mainframe, we can connect the dots. And so this is very true end-to-end visibility, being able to go from what the user is experiencing in their browser and being able to trace everything all the way back to to the database, the mainframe, some third-party service.
Very nice. Excellent. Okay, so if we go back to the waterfall analysis, what's great about the waterfall analysis is that this user's action, load the page, we could actually see the service flow of how it was going through your environment as well. So if we click this, the service flow for this, we can see that they're coming in here, they're hitting a proxy or some other device, flowing all the way through. And we had that listed to the problem. So I'll go ahead and hit here all the way down to the check destination is where.
Hey, Troy, hold on a second here, because everyone always glances over this one piece that I think is
not yet. I'm getting to it.
I think it's kind of amazing that Dynatrace does this. And that's, Troy mentioned that traffic hit a proxy. There's
right here.
Right there. Yeah. That proxy, you know what? We didn't instrument that at all. Dynatrace
right.
is smart enough to understand in this particular case that proxy exists. So that could be a firewall, that could be a switch, there could be some sort of appliance that's in there. And even without us going in and having to do any additional instrumentation to it or connecting to it, we're still aware of it. And those things are important because when you're trying to diagnose how the flow of traffic is performing and how it's behaving, what's being routed to what, those proxies and their configuration, they can absolutely lead to problems. And so we often gloss over that, but it's actually a really key critical thing that we do, and it just happens automatically. Keep going, man.
Excellent. Well, you can see what's built out over here is the chain from the user experience all the way down to the check destination, how that was called in your environment through these services that could be resident in different processes on different hosts for this user's actions. And it was all discovered through this check destination problem in the business impact. It's all stitched together. It's amazing. But I'm going to go back to that problem. So we'll come back here to problem because there was a question about user actions linkages at the beginning of the hour, right? I forget what the actual wording of the question was. Do you remember that question, Jonesy?
Hold on a second here. I'm scrolling through the
questions. Talking about the Smartscape and linkages of user actions.
Oh, actually, you know what? I think the easier way and more interesting way to show this is, you know what, Troy? Why don't we go into a database and why don't we show them a backtrace?
Well, I'm getting there. Oh, you got it.
All right.
I'm showing a backtrace. So that's what I'm doing. So you asked about the user experience. So we just had that user session and we showed how it flows through the system. But I'm going back to this problem card because I'm kind of pivoting on backtraces a little bit. That what happens if you are you just gained responsibility for this application, and you now been notified check destination's a problem, and you need to figure out what's going on. So you come in here and you do this check destination service, and you look at this going, I don't necessarily know how this is flowing in my system, but so you come in here and you try to look at the service flow. Well, that's not helpful, right? But what's great about Dinotrace, and that's where we're getting with, is on backtracing. I can see how this check destination service was called. Just with a click of a button, it comes in here and goes, okay, this is how the check destination got flown through. The Easy Travel customer front end activated these various steps, users were calling it, and we got down to this check destination. So let's come in here and do the service flow for the customer front end. It's going to automatically filter the customer front end all the way down to the check destination. So now you can see exactly on the service flow how it gets down to the check destination and see what's contributing to it. And now, instead of trying to understand where this service and the methods inside of it, how it's being called, and needing that innate knowledge, you can leverage Dynatrace platform with the backtrace, and it's all stitched together by the Davis AI to find that information that you need to know how your application's functioning. Say you just inherited it, now you have the tools to go find out how it interacts in the environment.
Troy, I like how you're describing this, that somebody's inherited this application. And a lot of people don't take this into account, but honestly, in IT circles, what happens is most applications are put together, and the understanding of how things interrelate to each other is rarely well documented.
Yep.
And there is a certain amount of tribal knowledge that gets built up inside of organizations, right? And then heaven forbid something happens to those people that have that tribal knowledge. Maybe they decide to retire, maybe they decide to leave. Now what happens is you're stuck with an application that you really don't quite understand how everything communicates to each other. With Dynatrace, this automatic discovery capability, the way that we can do these back traces, the service flow maps, it allows organizations to not take as big a hit when that tribal knowledge walks out the door, because now you have a very good understanding as to, if I'm looking at something at the database, I know exactly what is upstream and calling it. And if I'm looking at something upstream, I can see what the impact is in terms of the calls that are going to be made downstream.
I can resonate with that. Well, the reason I did this inherited, because I actually did have a role as a solutions engineer in the past where I inherited fixing problems, and it was for applications that people had stopped developing. The owners had either, we had a consultancy firm that built the code and is no longer with us. So spent hours Wireshark looking at data packets, figuring out what was calling what, looking at code, trying to figure out what systems and services it was calling. This would have saved me immeasurable amount of time in that gig. So, well, that's all I have to really share. It's a whole heck of a lot of information. If you want to get this in your environment, we have the ability to do free trials. Go to our website, click a link, download the OneAgent, put it on a host, and start seeing all this information. Additionally, as an SE, I will help you in your journey with a POC. You want help? You want to instrument something? You want to connect something? You want to see how the visibility into it? I'd be happy to help. So just feel free to reach out to me. Let me know.
You know what, Troy? Before you wrap up, do me a favor and head. Sorry, bud. I'm not letting you off the hook just yet.
I'm not done.
You're not done. Head down to the hub, and let's talk about the hub for a second, because you just mentioned something that you're 100% right. Folks that are listening, if you want to give Dynatrace a try, by all means, click on that link that we just pasted into the chat window. You can click on that link and immediately get access to a free trial of Dynatrace. It doesn't cost you any money. It's not going to do anything goofy like ask you for a credit card number up front or anything like that. You can use Dynatrace for a couple of weeks, the full version of Dynatrace. You'll have access to everything that we showed you today. Now, the Dynatrace Hub that we're now going to go look at, this is ultimately how you start plugging your technologies into Dynatrace. Now, the easiest way of plugging technologies into Dynatrace is by deploying that agent. The OneAgent by far is the easiest way that we can ingest metrics into Dynatrace. But you can also ingest metrics into Dynatrace in a number of different ways. You can connect to devices and appliances. You can ingest logs. You can connect to your cloud subscription. That Dynatrace Hub, you can see a list of hundreds of different types of technologies that you can very easily connect into Dynatrace. So, feel free, take that for a spin, give it a try. We got another question here. Quick question: can Dynatrace identify Kerberos stable accounts and provide alerts? All right, you know what? This is the fun thing about doing these, sort of ask me anything, getting to know Dynatrace sessions, because you always run into something that you've never heard of before and you're not familiar with. So I have to honestly say, I'm not aware of that off the top of my head. I probably have to go look into that before I actually say whether or not we can or we can't connect to it. Have you heard of that, Troy?
I'm just wondering if it's an IAM question on Kerberos and whether or not it's trying to figure out the identity of someone and being able to tag them that way. But that's an assumption, and whether or not it might be just a spelling thing. I don't know what Kerberos' stable is.
Yeah, no, me either. So, the great thing about Dynatrace is, as we have a very expansive platform, for the most part, we typically have some mechanism or another of being able to get metrics into Dynatrace. And that could be anything from somebody using, say, a 20-year-old AS400 that they would need to be able to get some metrics into Dynatrace, or the latest and greatest sort of technologies that are driving our K8s applications. So we've got here. Oh, it's an attack technique used by threat actors.
Oh,
Oh, okay. There we go. That's interesting. So, Dynatrace actually does, in fact, actually have an AppSec component to it. Now, our AppSec component is powered by a platform called Snick or Sneak. Depends on who you talk to, how they like to pronounce it. But effectively, what we do is we pull in vulnerability information from that Snick database, and then we analyze what Dynatrace has visibility into. And so that does work for things like Java, .NET. It can even work for Kubernetes related vulnerabilities. So if the vulnerability in this particular case is something that is described in SNCC and then is basically being used by either Java, .NET, Node.js, K8s. For the most part, we have some pretty good coverage at being able to detect those vulnerabilities, and if they are in fact actually present in your environment. I'm not going to spoil our thunder about what's coming out in a couple of months. Suffice to say, in a couple of months, we'll be doing some very interesting things with our AppSec capabilities. And this is more specifically on Windows accounts. You know what? I think I want to answer this question also again, probably in next week's or the week's after's session. And the reason being is if it's related to specifically to Windows accounts, and if that information is being captured within logs, we actually have some really super exciting stuff coming down the pipe related to logs. And right now we can do some very advanced. That was going to be one of the things I wanted to mention in the the what's new session today. Was we just released some new functionality into preview as it relates to specifically log processing. So definitely, this is something that we can help out with, probably on a later session.
one thing I'd like to add on the AppSec that I'm showing here, and you were talking about the implementing this and with Sneak. If you got to talk about the the elephant in the room, the Log4j, and how users of our AppSec capability, when Sneak released that fingerprint of the Log4j vulnerability, within 10 minutes, the users of the AppSec knew what was vulnerable in their environment, what libraries on what hosts were vulnerable, and able to go and target those for remediation. Others that were not, might not be using Dynatrace. I've talked to several customers that spent weeks and months on spreadsheets trying to identify what was vulnerable, which ones were using which libraries, and doing it by hand, trying to do that analysis and that identification. And that's huge on a time saving and being able to keep your environment secure. Additionally, it will tell you what the vulnerability, when the vulnerability is in a prod versus a stage versus a dev environment, so that you can target the prod and a stage or your dev environments are disconnected, they're air gapped, they're not actually out public facing, those developers don't have to necessarily patch those right away. It can be a decision to go to bed and not have to go and get some sleep and do it at a later date that's more appropriate with your development and release cycle. So anything to add on that, Jonesy?
Well, actually, it's just getting back to the original question on the Kerberos stuff, because now this is actually starting to ring a bell. Because I do remember actually seeing something showing up in the Windows security logs that I'd seen for some other customers. So, definitely from a log perspective, we can get visibility into when those events are showing up inside the security logs. And if we can see it show up inside of the security logs, these are things that we can then start creating essentially log events around, which you can set up behaviors inside of Dynatrace to how to react when we see these log events. If they hit a certain threshold, does that generate a problem card? Does somebody get notified of it? So that type of stuff certainly is within the range of some things that I've seen in the past. Going through here, there is only a second here. I don't want to get too much into this because what I'd like to do is probably have one of our security experts come on to a later session of getting to know Dynatrace, and let's just have a real sort of AppSec focused getting to know Dynatrace conversation. Somebody had also asked a question here, though. Mark had asked a question: what are the 3 tips for working with my Dynatrace having 3 separate tenants? So if you have 3 separate tenants and you're working with them, first off, what you probably want to do is connect them. And so there is this thing called an environment API token. These environment API tokens allow you to basically share data between tenants. Now, when you create the token, you'll be given a whole bunch of options about what you want to allow that token to be able to do. But you can very easily share things like time series data between tenants. So anything that could be represented on a chart like a time series, that's easily shared between tenants. Other things that can be shared between tenants is, to a limited degree, you can traverse a transaction, a pure path. Typically, you're limited to a small number of pure paths that you could go between one tenant and another, but it is something that can be done. But the key to doing this is by creating these environment API tokens and then using those to actually connect the tenants together.
Hey, Jonesy.
Yo.
I think the question is referencing prod, stage, QA, dev environments all monitored by the same tenant. And I would say you could provide tagging of the environment components to segment them like a host group. Put all QA servers in a host group. Put all prod servers in a host group. I don't think I think that there's an update on it saying that it was it's talking about the environments as opposed to multiple Dynatrace tenants.
Oh, as opposed to, see, this is the interesting thing. Language, the way we describe things is really specific to us. So when we talk about environments and tenants, typically we're talking about Dynatrace environments and tenants. So those are, effectively our clusters where we're storing data. But if you're talking about a monitored, something else, your tenants,
like a logical collection,
like a logical thing, Host grouping is a perfect way of being able to do that. Management zones is another way of being able to do that. So, folks, we're kind of at the, hold on a second here, what's meant by tenant. So I'll finish off today's conversation with that question, and that is, a tenant from a Dynatrace perspective is it's effectively the environment that you are working in. So when you're looking at your browser and you're logged into Dynatrace, along the top in your browser address bar, there's a URL and there's a unique, what we call tenant ID. That is effectively the part of the cluster that is unique to your Dynatrace environment. And so
I have highlighted that on my browser. This
perfect.
is the demo. This is the demo tenant up at the top.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's effectively what we mean. Hey folks, well listen, it's 4 o'clock. First off, folks, I apologize for having these issues today with you know, my internet provider. They a half hour ago sent me a very polite little note telling me that I was having an internet outage. I thought that was very sweet of them, considering I was already half hour into the outage. But hey, Troy, you've done a fabulous job today.
Well,
We've
you know, I'm just so glad. I'm so glad that your internet provider allowed me to be long-winded.
Great job, man. Really appreciate it. And folks, as always, thank you very much for the questions. We're going to be back in a couple of weeks to do another session. My internet will hopefully be up by then, and we'll have a great time. We'll make sure that I'm going to do an AppSec focused one sometime in the future as well, because lots of great AppSec questions today. Okay, folks, with that, have a great day and take care all.
Thanks for having us.